I think we're ready. Can I get my screen up here? It's not getting anything from me. Hey, those are my kids. They are getting so big. This is the biggest they've ever been. All right, let me pull this over here. Yeah, that's a nice. It's a big screen. Yeah, that's gonna be good. And bring this over here. Yeah, look at that. Build it to believe it. All right, there we go. And we'll push that button there. And, oh, that's wrong. That's a really big screen. Okay, wait. Hold on. Forget PowerPoint. Who even likes PowerPoint? No, we're not even going to say that. We're living on the edge here. This is an AI conference. Let's just. What would happen if I asked Claude to make a presentation for me real quick? Hey, I'm at Nordic Growth Summit, and my build it to believe it slides are way too small. Can you throw something together for me? Yeah, that'll probably be good. So while that's loading, we'll see what happens. I'm Kyle. I work at HubSpot. This is going to be really good. I love HubSpot. I talk about HubSpot all the time. That's why they made me an evangelist. I talk about it a lot. I assume some of you are not HubSpot customers. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not really interested in pitching HubSpot to you. So I'm going to make this as generally relevant as possible, but please forgive me if I talk about HubSpot because I just can't help myself. Let's download that, and let's give this a go. I have a good feeling about this. All right. Hey, we even got fireworks. Wow. Good job, Claude. So I do this for a living. I talk for a living. I give presentations. Claude just built this in like 30 seconds while I introduced myself. So I'm wondering the same thing a lot of you have been wondering. Should I be worried about my job? I want you to hold that thought for a minute. Because I'm an educator, I think we should start with definitions. I'm talking about AI agents, theoretically. So let's have a nice big definition here. AI agents are just AI that does stuff, right? LLMs know things, but agents do things. So if we want to take a quick look behind the curtain here, you may be wondering, how did Claude make this presentation? How did he know what he was going to say? The fact of the matter is, I cheated. So if we come back to Claude real quick, what is happening here is very, very deterministic. If we come in here, Claude has skills. Have any of you built skills? You can give it instructions and it knows what to do. I have built a skill that is called Nordic Presentation. And anytime I ask it for a Nordic Growth Summit presentation, it delivers a pre-built, stage-ready HTML presentation. It does not generate it. It never generates HTML, never asks questions, never modifies a file. Claude did help me build this presentation, but we spent weeks on it. And I just built a skill that would make it seem like things were falling apart so you could all feel really awkward with me while I felt awkward on stage. And it was a nice bonding experience. Now we're friends and family because we've been through something terrible together. So that's kind of the idea of an agent. It's a thing that has instructions and it follows them. And usually the output's going to be different each time. It's not common to have an agent that only can output one thing. But that's kind of like the most basic version of this, right? And so now here comes the obligatory part where I talk about HubSpot. Really, as you think about agents and what they can do, you're only limited by your ability to think what if sorts of questions, right? So at HubSpot, we've been thinking, what if your website could answer customer questions all by itself, right? And we built this agent called Customer Agent, and it's here and it's nice, and that's a weird animation I chose to do. But if we come over here, this is what it looks like in real life. And if you imagine taking a chat widget on your website and just plugging it into Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, who knows what it might say, right? Because it knows everything in the whole world and it may not know the specifics of your company, and someone asks a question and it could say anything. The idea of Customer Agent is that you give it just specific information. This is the body of knowledge you are allowed to share with our customers. So you come in here and you can give it some knowledge. If you want to add some content, you can do it from HubSpot, right? If your HubSpot website is hosted on HubSpot or your knowledge base, you could just click these and add in, blog posts or landing pages or whatever else you want. You can upload a file. This is great if you have stuff you want your customer agent to know that is not on your public website, or if you have structured data, like a spreadsheet or a JSON file that's a product catalog with inventory information or pricing information. You can upload that here. It can read it and understand it. If you're not using HubSpot for your website, no hard feelings. You can just put a URL in here, and we'll scrape it every week, and we'll update customer agent appropriately. And then you can also just straight up create short answers. Hey, sometimes people ask this particular question, and this is how I want you to answer it, right? And then that is all it knows. But I said agents are things AIs that do things, not just know stuff, right? This is kind of like a teeny tiny LLM. But giving it actions is what makes it an agent. So one thing you can do, because HubSpot is a CRM system, is you can give it access to specific CRM properties. So like street address, right? If people are constantly chatting in and saying, hey, I moved, can you change my address? You don't really need a human in the loop for that. You can just give it access to that. And when you do something like this, look, we'll do a new one. We'll do an example of how about like mobile phone or something. So mobile phone number, you have two options. You can do view settings. Is customer agent allowed to reveal what's in this property? And also edit settings. Is it allowed to update this data? Some things you don't want customer agent updating probably. And for both of these, you can choose how protective you want to be of this information. Do you want to just, if they know the email, it'll divulge the information, or do you want to send them a verification email? So that's kind of a customer agent. You can also, if you want to get really fancy, you can build actions, which are like full-on API calls, right? So if password resets or checking an order status is a thing you want customer agent to do, you just go in there and put in the API gobbledygook, and then it's good to go. So that's kind of agent number one. I've got too many tabs here now. So what if number two? What if you don't use HubSpot? What if you don't care about HubSpot? What if you want this guy on stage to stop talking about HubSpot? Well, there's this thing called Agent.ai, the website. Anybody heard of Agent.ai? This is like a pet project of a guy who founded HubSpot, but it's not an official HubSpot product. And Agent.ai, I believe, is tab number 2. So you can come in here. Yeah, we'll leave it like this. This looks fine. And it's just no, we're going to make it smaller. It's just a marketplace of agents. There are a few thousand of them here now. And you can just come in and, if you want help building a buyer persona, or if you want a domain idea generator, or if you really struggle making memes, there are agents here that can help you with these sorts of everyday problems. And if you don't see what you're looking for in the, 2,390 agents that are here, there's an agent builder. And you can come in here, and this is all free. This is just a free site. You can come in here. I made one that reads terms of service for me, because I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking at when I'm looking at terms of service. And when you create an agent, you come in. You can choose what kind. We'll do a workflow agent real quick. And we'll just show you the options here. So when most agents are just, they're there on agent.ai and they're run manually. But you can set it up like, I'm going to email this agent and ask it questions and it'll give me answers. Or I want it kicked off by a particular integration or a webhook, or it's going to run on a schedule or whatever that may be. And then you can add all kinds of actions. There's inputs. You can ask the user for inputs. It's a long list of inputs. You can pull stuff from social media. You can integrate intelligence stuff. You can. There's AI and content. Are you overwhelmed yet? I can keep going. You can pull in HubSpot stuff. You can pull in business stuff. Anybody not overwhelmed? Some people are not overwhelmed. Workflow and logic. The thing I feel like I was gonna give you an example of an agent, and then I just got so lost looking in the objects, I never made one. And what I'm realizing is that it can be actually very difficult to get to this what if question. This is where it all starts. You need to have some idea of like, ooh, what if I didn't have to do this thing? Or what if somebody would do this thing for me? And then you can build an agent. But we have not practiced thinking this way. All our lives we've been thinking, if it's going to get done, I've got to be the one to do it. And if I'm not going to be the one to do it, then it's not going to get done. And agents push us to think in a different way. So I've got a what if. Since I've got this enormous stage, what if I stop using it as slides and start using it as mood lighting while I tell you a story? This is how I came to accidentally start building agents. Because fun fact that I'm willing to say publicly now, that I did not tell the organizers at the outset, when they asked me to speak on agents, I hardly knew what an agent was. This was just a few months ago. And I was like, well, HubSpot's been talking about agents. We have this customer agent thing. I can probably figure it out. And then, as you saw, when I went to build something on agent.ai, I kind of froze and didn't really know what to do. But completely separately, in an unrelated part of my life, I was having a phone call with my brother. He and I talk pretty regularly. We're good friends. And he just in casual conversation, as brothers do, mentioned this obscure fact from early Christian philosophy that I had never heard of before, this idea of theories of the atonement. And because he's my big brother, I pretended like I knew what that was. And afterward, I went and asked Claude what it was. And the one thing I know about, the one thing I knew at that point about research with AIs is you can go and give a deep research AI a prompt. You can ask a question, and it'll give you pretty good research. But what works better is if you ask the AI first to write the deep research prompt for you, and then you take that to deep research. So I went to Claude, and I said, Claude, my brother mentioned this thing called theories of the atonement. I don't know what that is. Can you write me a deep research prompt that will tell me how many of these theories they are, who made them up, when they were invented, what they entail, how they're different from each other, and whether or not they're still in use today. And so Claude wrote me this really beautiful, really long deep research prompt, and I put it into deep research, and deep research thought for 2 hours, and then crashed. And Anthropic has outages sometimes, so I ran it again, and it thought for 2 hours, and it crashed again. So I went back to the original chat, and I said, Claude, this is too big. Too many questions for one prompt. Can you divide it into, let's say, thirds? And Claude said, yes, of course, no problem. Here are 3 different deep research prompts. So I ran the first one, it thought for like an hour and a half, gave me a very nice research report. Did the second one, it thought for a little more than an hour, gave me a very nice research report. Third one, thought for like 20 minutes, and then gave me a very nice research report. And at the end of all of this, I had 88 pages of research. And I think these are pretty close to life size. That's pretty cool. So I was like, great, this is how you learn stuff. You read 88 pages at a time, right? And I sat down and I started reading, and I quickly discovered a problem. Although the research was good, it was not especially human readable, because when Claude had divided that deep research prompt into thirds, it divided it, I would say, vertically instead of horizontally. The first one was like, yes, there are 15 theories of the atonement. Here's who made them up and when they were invented. And the second one was like, yes, there are 17 theories of the atonement, and here's what they entail and how they're different from each other. And the third one said, yeah, there's roughly a dozen theories of the atonement, and here's which ones are still in use today. And so there was the information didn't line up, and there was no way I was going to be able to synthesize all this in my head. And this is when I had my first real big breakthrough what-if moment. I went back to Claude, and I said, hey, Claude, I have an idea. Here are these 3 research artifacts totaling 88 pages. Can you take these and turn them into like a college-level course? Could you like write me a textbook, and could you write me quizzes? And Claude was like, yeah, sure. Here's a syllabus. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the syllabus, and you're going to take the deep research, and you're going to start 16 different chats, because I made 16 different units for you, Kyle. And you're going to ask each one of those chats for a textbook chapter. And then I got really excited. I was like, wait, Claude, I've always had this idea that the best way to assess a student's knowledge isn't through like a written exam, but through an oral examination, like Socratic questioning. So could you, after I read each of these units, ask me questions and conversationally assess my knowledge? And chat said, that sounds like a great idea, Kyle. That would be so much fun. So what you're going to do in each of those 16 chats is you're going to ask for a textbook chapter and a super secret instructor guide that you, Kyle, are not going to read, but you can bring it to me in a new chat, and then I will test your knowledge using that. And so I thought this was great. And I went and I started 16 different chats, and I got 400 pages of information about theories of the atonement and 16 different instructor guides. And I read the first unit, and I went and took the first instructor guide, and I gave it to Claude, and I said, let's do this test. And it's like, all right, let's do this test. And we talked, and we had fun, and we bonded, and it was awesome. It was the best academic experience of my life. I was in heaven. I'm a genius. I figured something out. And then I went and read Unit 2, and then I went and took the Unit 2 exam. And that's when the wheels started to fall off. There were clearly some problems. It first became apparent to me that there were problems when I got to a question in the examination that I didn't know the answer to, and I said, Claude, I don't know the answer, what should I do? And Claude said, oh, that's all right, Kyle, here's the answer, and you still get full credit. Well, that doesn't feel very robust. And so I was a little stuck. But it was about this time that I learned about Claude skills. A coworker told me about this thing you can do in Claude where you give it instructions, and it does one thing really well. And I thought, I wonder if I could make a Claude skill that would do oral examinations really well. And so I went to Claude and I said, hey Claude, can you make a skill for oral examinations? And it said, yeah, no problem. It would go like this. And I said, hold on, Claude, you're really bad at oral examinations. How about we back up and we do some deep research? So it gave me a deep research prompt. We found out like all the best practices empirically shown to work for oral examinations. And then we took that back and we built a skill, the oral examination skill. And you give it the instructor guide, and it's built on these instructional best practices, and then it does an oral exam that's really good. And the first version of this was awful. It was really mean, actually. It would ask me a question, and I would give an answer, and I would just say, sorry, that's incorrect, and move on to the next question. And I was like, no, I want you to talk to me. I want you to give me feedback. And so we massaged it, and we got it to a point that it worked really well. And then I went to retake the Unit 2 oral examination using this new skill, and I got to that same question, and I still didn't know the answer. And I said, Claude, I think the instructor guide includes questions that were not covered in the unit materials. So we need a skill that will align the instructor guide to what is actually taught in the course. And so we did more deep research. How do you design the scope of an examination? And we built another skill, and that one feeds into the first one. Great! So now we regenerated the 16 instructor guides. And then I went, and this time, Unit 2 asked me a new question that I didn't know the answer to. And I went back to Claude and I said, look, here are the Unit 2 materials. Here's the question it asked me. I'm pretty sure it's not covered. And Claude said, Kyle, it's totally covered. Look at page 3. There's a list of 10 bullet points. Number 7 is the one you're looking for. I said, Claude, that's not how education works. You can't just have one random bullet point and then have it turn up on the test. If something's important enough to be on the test, it better be at least a paragraph, if not a whole section. And I bet we can do some more deep research and define that. And so we kept working backwards. And eventually, it turns out that it takes an awful lot of different skills all working in this pipeline model to build an actually academically robust course. And then for fun, to get off, we left instructional best practices and we went to psychological best practices to create this goals interview where you can just sit down, and it uses motivational interviewing, which is a thing therapists love to use, that gets you to express and commit to your own goals. And then we also did some deep research to say, wait a minute, if we are teaching through written learning materials and an oral examination, there are certain things you can't teach, right? So now, if I come into the goals interview and say, Claude, can you teach me to play guitar? Claude will say, no. I can teach you the history of the guitar. I can teach you the physics of the guitar. I can tell you how many frets there are and why they are spaced in the manner that they are spaced. But if you want to learn to play guitar, Kyle, get off your computer and go find a guitar instructor. And then we added one more at the end, so that if anything comes up in an oral examination that is not covered fully in the course, it can make me a supplemental education piece and then tell me if you want to learn more, we can start the process over and we can generate another course. So this is fun. This is a thing I've been doing on company time with company money that has nothing to do with my job. And I was a little nervous because I tested it, and I can tell you it makes a really good course on philosophy, but I don't actually know if it does anything else. Luckily, at this same time, something else happened to me that I thought was unrelated to this talk. And this one was sort of tragic. After 11 wonderful years at HubSpot, deftly avoiding anything managerial, I got tasked with leading a group project. And I have no idea how this happened to me. I've tried so hard to avoid it. But we were going to make a half-day in-person workshop about Customer Agent, which you now are experts on. It was me and 5 other content creators. And for whatever reason, I was chosen as the chief of this project. It was my job to divvy up the work and set deadlines and follow up with people, and I could not handle it. You want me to stand on stage with an enormous screen in front of a crowd of people and talk? I can do that all day long. You want me to tell somebody how to make a presentation and talk in front of people? I go to pieces. I just don't, that's not me, that's not how I'm built. And so I did what any good do-it-yourselfer does, and I just made the whole workshop myself using Claude, and it was terrible. It was one of the biggest failures of my professional career, and my manager and I sat down and I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't ask anyone for help. And she said, I know, everyone's been asking me when they're going to get work to do. And so it was really hard. And I said, I don't know how to learn to delegate. And as I said these words to my manager, I was like, wait a minute. I just built this pipeline of skills that can teach me anything. And so I went back to it. And I went to the goals interview thing, and I said, hey, Collab, let's make a course where you teach me how to delegate. And it, using these motivational interviewing best practices from the field of psychology, said, hold on, Kyle. Back up. Why are we talking about this? And so I told it the whole sad story. Yeah, I failed. I did this thing. I don't know how to delegate. I need to learn how to delegate. And it said, hold on, Kyle. Tell me about the other aspects of your life. Happen to know you have 5 kids. You ever trouble delegating to them? I'm like, well, yeah, we talked about that a little bit. And I was like, Kyle, I happen to know, you're like a leader at your church. You ever delegate stuff there? I was like, well, yeah. It's like, Kyle, you sometimes talk to me about the fact that you are writing an animated musical about Joan of Arc. Which, by the way, at the after party, if you want to get me talking, don't ask me about HubSpot, don't ask me about AI, ask me about Joan of Arc. She's great. But yeah, I'm writing this musical, and like, how's your collaboration with your songwriter? Like, well, funny you should mention that. It's sort of rocky sometimes. And we talked about all the things, all the different aspects of my life. It asked me about managers I've had in the past. Who was good? Who was bad? What did I like? What did I didn't? Are there people out in the world, Kyle, that you admire, that you aspire to be like? And it pulled this together into a goals doc that became a syllabus for something called facilitative management. The conclusion we came to is, I know what delegation is, I know how it works in theory, but there's something about my relationship with my peers that makes it hard for me to ask them to do literally anything. And that was the problem we needed to address. And so it generated this 10-unit course for me, and I sat and read Unit 1, and it was not just research. It was based on research, but it was like elements from your life. Hey, remember that one manager you really liked who did that one thing? They were applying the principles of this framework over here. Here's how to generalize that. And then when I took the Unit 1 examination, there was one hypothetical question where a guy was writing a screenplay for an animated musical and was having trouble asking his songwriter to do a particular thing, and it asked me to evaluate how that could be done better. It was my life turned into a business course. And I don't want to be dramatic and say it changed me to the core, but guys, it kind of changed me to the core. It was wild to see something so personalized and bespoke just for me. Now, one thing that came out of that when I was in that interview thing, and it was asking me all these questions, it asked me if there was anyone I admired. And I told it, I really admire the late thinker Clay Christensen. He wrote the Innovator's Dilemma. He pioneered the theory of disruption. He invented the framework of jobs to be done. He also happened to teach at Harvard Business School, which is just down the road from me in Boston. And there was once in 2017, before he passed away, I was building a course for HubSpot Academy, and I got the opportunity to sit down and interview him with cameras rolling. And we've mined those clips for years building HubSpot Academy courses. But Clay, he was the most important business thinker of his time. And he was a giant of a man. I scarcely came up to his shoulders. He was so tall. But so many things about him, not related to business, really, really blew me away. For example, the first time I met Clay Christensen, the very first words he ever said to me were, "Hi, I'm Clay." He had no presupposition that I knew who he was, that I could identify him on spot by sight, despite the fact that I had come to interview him on camera. He was so unassuming, he was so kind, he was so humble. But my favorite memory of Clay Christensen, after we had met several times, in fact, maybe the last time I ever met with him, I was sitting and I ventured to share with him my own little theory. Hey, I've been doing this research, I've been trying these things, I have this idea. What do you think of that? And after I shared my little theory with Clay, he sat back in his chair, his eyes were wide, and he said, "That's interesting. Kyle, that is really interesting. Would you mind writing that up when we're done here and sending it to me in an email so I can discuss it with my team? Because I think you're onto something. I think that's really insightful." And I was over the moon. Clay Christensen, the most important business thinker of our time, thinks I'm interesting. He thinks my theory has insights that are worth sharing with his team. And that, still to this day, makes me feel pretty good about myself. But then, a few years later, when he passed away, I went to his funeral. I think the entire city of Boston went to his funeral. I think many people all over the world came to, it was a huge event. He had touched so many lives and he was so influential. And his children, who were grown into adults, were the speakers. And they all just shared favorite memories of their dad. And one of them said something that really surprised me. She said that the reason he taught at Harvard Business School, the reason he continued that professorship even when his health was very bad, is because every day he would come home and he would say to his wife, Christine, you will not believe what this student just said to me. He said this thing, or she asked this question. I never thought of it that way. Every day, I am so lucky to get to go to Harvard and learn from those students. Clay Christensen, who legitimately changed the way we think about business strategy, didn't get there by feeling like an expert, by thinking he knew everything. No. Clay Christensen was not a know-it-all. He was a learn-it-all. He was endlessly curious. He was always asking questions, and every person he met, even weirdos from HubSpot, he thought he could learn something from. And so, if we go back to this question, should I be worried about my job? I think the underlying question is, well, what is your job? Who are you? Do you consider yourself a knowledge worker? I've always considered myself a knowledge worker. I can't build anything with my hands. I work with my brain. I do tasks on computers all day, right? I am a knowledge worker, and what is valuable about me is all the content of my brain. Well, bad news for us knowledge workers. Knowledge has been commoditized. The LLMs know literally everything. So if your value is what you're holding in your brain, you're sunk. Yes, you should be very worried about your job. But do you know what we've got that the LLMs ain't got? You know what they can never take from us? Well, it's this ability to ask, what if? And don't judge the fact that this image was in fact made by an LLM. The point is, I thought to ask for it, right? So we need to stop thinking of ourselves as knowledge workers. It's time to usher in the era of the curiosity worker. Our questions, the things we wonder, our hopes, our dreams, the stuff we aspire to, that's what we provide. That cannot be automated and commoditized. Let me tell you another story. This one's about Joan of Arc, because I can't help myself. I've been working on this musical about Joan of Arc for like 3 or 4 years now. And it's written, the songs are composed, and we've recorded demos. But then out of the blue, a month or so ago, my songwriter reaches out to me. She's like, Kyle, do we have a villain in this story? And I was like, well, not really like one specific villain, no. And she's like, Kyle, I really want to write a villain song. I've been watching classic Disney movies with my kids, and there's always like a really despicable villain who sings a really big, dramatic song, and like, I feel like I could write a really good villain song if you could give me a really good villain, Kyle. And I said, well, you know, early on, Joan first comes to the French court. There's this guy, Georges de la Tremouille. Sorry, I don't speak French, in case you couldn't tell. And he was a pain. He was always fighting against Joan. They never got along. It would be pretty easy to turn him into a villain. And she was like, great. And she ran off and she wrote a villain song and she sent it to me, and it was really good. I really liked it. But in the current draft of the script, George is not a villain per se. He's just kind of obnoxious. And now we have this really great villain song that actually is doing really important work for the shape of the script and the plotting and the momentum. And so I needed to figure out, can I rewrite him as a villain? But I don't want to just make stuff up. And so I tried to do a little research on Georges de la Tremouille, and it just turns out we don't know very much about him. I did find out, though, good news, he got arrested. So maybe he was a bad guy, but when I tried to figure out why he got arrested, it was like bonkers medieval French politics that I didn't understand at all. But it just so happens I had created a pipeline of 9 Claude skills that can teach me anything. And so I sat down with Claude and I said, I have an idea for a course that simultaneously teaches two completely unrelated topics. And Claude said, well, that sounds interesting, Kyle. What have you got in mind? And I said, I'm writing this musical about Joan of Arc, and I don't understand medieval French politics. So I need you to help me understand medieval French politics, and I need you to help me understand specifically Georges de la Tremouille, who is the Grand Chamberlain. I don't know what that job means. I don't know why people didn't like him. I need to figure out if he's good villain material. So I want you to teach me that. But at the same time, I honestly don't know very much about the theory of the construction of animated musicals, the role of villains, and what a villain song is supposed to do. So can you teach me the theory of animated musicals and villain songs at the same time you teach me medieval French politics and the role of Georges de la Tremouille in a single course that will not tell me how to make him a villain, but tell me whether or not I should? And Claude was like, Kyle, those topics have nothing to do with each other. And I was like, I know. I really want to know what's going to happen. And so it asked me some questions, and we talked, and I posited some ideas, and it came up with this course. And it made it. It made a 14-unit course about animated musicals and medieval French politics and Georges de la Tremouille. And it gave it to me, and I printed it out, and I read it on an airplane while I was traveling to a speaking engagement. And Unit 1 was not about animated musicals and was not about medieval French politics. Unit 1 said, Kyle, you are here to learn about the nexus of animated musicals and medieval French politics. But before we can talk about those things, we need to introduce some concepts from the field of information architecture, because it turns out these can be applied, these frameworks apply equally well to villains in film and villain songs in animated musicals and medieval French politics. So if you can understand these concepts, then we have a framework that will hold the whole thing together. I've taken a lot of college courses. Some of them were very specific. Pretty sure never in the history of the world has there been a course on medieval French politics and animated musical villains. And if there ever was, I'm sure it was not in the information architecture department of the college. But I have a whole course on that I've taken. And I now know how it all fits together. And I might be the only person in history to have that knowledge. The fact of the matter is, I have learned things nobody's ever known because I have asked a question nobody ever thought to ask. The information was there, the LLMs were able to find it, but without someone thinking to ask such an off-the-wall specific question, it would have left hidden forever in the treasure troves of human knowledge. This is not unique to me. I am merely a human being, and I have a brain, and so I have questions. And I think the future for all of us is leaning into that. No longer allowing ourselves to think that the thing that makes us special and the thing that makes us human is what we know, but is in fact our curiosity and our ability to hone the talent, the gift of asking questions. And all of us can do that. All children are innately curious. My 3-year-old currently has switched from asking me why, which was obnoxious, to asking me how, which I don't even know how is that a dog? What does that even mean? And we get our children to stop asking questions, and that is a huge mistake. We've all lost this gift that we acquired very early on. And if we can bring it back, if you can bring it back in yourself, you are going to be capable of creating things you have never to this point been able to imagine. In fact, you're going to create things that are so big, that will be so surprising to you, that you'll have to build it to believe it. Thank you.